The medical profession has come a long way since the time of Hippocrates in the 5th century BC. Despite a marked departure from the original tenets of ancient times, almost 100% of U.S. medical schools require their graduates to swear to some form of the Hippocratic Oath. Dr. Damon Noto is a practicing physician at the Spine and Joint Center in Hasbrook Heights, New Jersey. His qualifications include stem cell therapy, pain management, physical medicine, physical rehabilitation, and acupuncture, all of which he administers with compassionate concern for his patients' well-being. In our Pure Heart Claremont interview today, Dr. Noto will shed some light on a modern antithesis of the medical motto, "Do no harm."
We might start by taking your pulse or reading maybe your vital signs.
That's a good idea.
No, I'm just teasing because this topic is very, very important.
Yeah.
And so we're here to make the world aware. Can you share with us a little bit about your background and how you got into the medical field?
Sure. Growing up, actually, had always been interested in the human body, the way it works. And then when I was in my, probably about 7 or 8 years old, my grandfather had come down with some illness. He had some heart disease, and he went through a process of really changing his whole lifestyle to try and become healthier and overcome his illness. And watching that process really got me fascinated by medicine, health, healing. And at that point, I realized I wanted to go into the medical field. And then gradually, as I went through schooling, it became clear to me I wanted to become a doctor.
So it was actually your grandfather that inspired you?
It was absolutely my inspiration. I went to school for college in the South. I was a northerner, decided to go down to Georgia. I went to Emory University for my pre-med, which was a great experience. Got to learn a different way of culture down in the South.
Mm-hmm.
And then for medical school, I came back up to New York City. I trained at Mount Sinai and then went on to Columbia and Cornell for my residency. So most of my schooling I did here in Manhattan, and I spent a year up in Boston as well. I kind of went towards the field of orthopedic and pain management. I was really fascinated by injuries, traumas to the body, and how do we overcome those. And I've spent the rest of my career learning about musculoskeletal injuries, joint injuries, back injuries, and how to help people heal from those.
How did you get involved with Doctors Against Forced Organ Harvesting?
That's a good story. My close friend of mine had called me up and said, Damon, do you know about organ harvesting and organ transplant situation of China? And I said, really, I didn't know that much about it. And he went on to tell me about some of the atrocities that were taking place there. And to be honest, at first, it was really hard for me to believe. So I said, you know what, I'm going to do some looking into this. I'll get back to you, because he had asked me, do I want to get involved? So I spent some time doing my own investigation, looking at different people's research and writings on the internet, and I started talking to people. And what I found was shocking to me. I called him back and said, you know what, I'm in. I'd love to help in any way I can. And at that time, I joined the organization Doctors Against Forced Organ Harvesting. And since then, I've been very active.
Is there any drawbacks to organ transplants?
You know, organ transplant in China is a different world compared to organ transplant in the United States, and it's a good thing for people to understand. Organ transplant in the United States usually comes in two sources. One is someone had an accident or passed away through natural causes, and their organs are still healthy and vital, and there's someone in the United States that needs that organ, so that organ is harvested and quickly taken to that person who needs it, and they get a transplant. Or it's through a friend or relative when someone needs an organ and they have, let's say, a kidney, and they say, you know what, I have 2 kidneys, I'm healthy, I know you really need it, I'll give it to you out of goodwill. And since we've done it this way for so many years, we have made really great advances in doing it safely for both the patient and for the healthy person that it's taken from. Organ transplant in China is a completely different situation. When you get an organ from China, your infection rate can be very high. The rate of rejection of an organ is extremely high. And that's mainly because of two things. One is the way they harvest the organ from an executed prisoner, usually, is not in the same conditions, is not done under the same standards as we do here in the U.S. And your aftercare is no way of the same standard as we have in the United States. So when we look at people who go to China and come back with these organs, their rate of rejection and infection are so much higher than here in the United States. In China, we like to say they have what's called an on-demand system, which is completely different than we have in the U.S. In the United States, if you need an organ, you go on a waiting list. You're basically waiting for that organ, and it's usually years. The average waiting time for a kidney could be over 2 years. In China, it's a completely different system. They have what's called an on-demand system, which is the only place in the world where you go and you say, I need an organ, and within 2 weeks' time, they're able to match you and give you that organ. So their system is based upon the demand. How many people need an organ, how many people to travel to China to get organ, and the way they're able to do that is they're taking this large prisoner system, large labor force camp system, these so-called Laogai systems that they have in China, and if there's a person there in that prison or in that forced labor camp that matches you, they'll execute that person, and they'll take their organs, extract their organs, and sell it to you at a price, a very high price, so that you can get an organ. The most transplant people were extremely shocked in around middle 2000s that when the hospitals in China started advertising on their websites, and they started saying, come to China within a couple weeks, we guarantee you an organ, and we'll find it for you in this short period of time. Thus, that was impossible. We couldn't understand how is that possible, because nowhere else in the world is it like that. Everywhere else in the world, we have this waiting system. So when we saw a country come out and say, there's no wait here, we're talking weeks, we'll get you.
So where are the organs coming from?
Exactly, we're starting to say, how is that possible?
Right.
And we have a very, I like to say a famous story, that one of the top transplant surgeons in Israel, he's a cardiothoracic transplant surgeon, so he transplants hearts. And he had a patient that was waiting for a heart transplant for over a year, and every week or so, he would go and round on this patient and say, how you doing today? And the one day he came by, he said, how you doing? And he said, I'm doing well. I got contacted by one of my insurance companies, and one of my insurance company rep and said, you know what, if you travel to China, in 2 weeks' time, they said you can have an organ and you can get transplanted on exactly this day. So initially, the surgeon was taken back. He thought he was joking. He said, well, that's impossible. And he said, no, I'm not kidding. They really said that. And he kind of laughed at it and left. And indeed, about a month or 6 weeks later, that patient came back. And he said, what happened? He said, I went to China on the exact day they told me I'd get my heart transplant. I got it.
Wow.
And the guy was like, how is that possible? So he did his own research and investigation and found out indeed that these people were going to China and getting their organs through executed prisoners.
And do the patients have that information, or that's just something that's between the doctors and the insurance company about where your organs are coming from?
The majority of people who go to China have no idea. Once they get there, some of them begin to realize that there's something not right going on. A lot of them report that in the middle of the night they're taken to a military hospital or a military institution. They're not told where the organs are coming from. Very rarely do they explain to them that it's an executed prisoner. And they definitely never tell them that they could be an executed prisoner of conscience.
Wow. Okay.
And that's never told to them.
Okay, we're talking about organ harvesting and also organ transplants.
Correct.
There's two different things, am I
Correct.
correct?
Correct.
Okay, so I read somewhere that there were organ harvesting from live human beings.
Correct.
Is that true?
Correct.
And where can that information be supported? Where can you get information on somebody who's alive, who's getting their heart taken out or their That's a form of execution, am I correct?
This is something I spend a little bit of time clarifying to people because it's a little hard to understand. In the United States, you have to be pronounced dead for us to harvest your organs, unless you are a relative or someone saying, you know what, you can have my organs, an organ that I have extra, like a kidney.
Okay.
But in China, they have this thing called live organ harvesting, and what we mean by that is, it's usually two scenarios. One is they've developed a technique to keep a person, instead of killing them, in China they used to execute people by shooting them in the back of the head, and then once they were dead, they would extract their organs. The problem with that is, once you take out someone's organs, it doesn't last very long. Those organs die very quickly and they become what we call unviable, not able to be given to someone else. So they wanted to figure out a way, well, how do I make that time period longer? And the way they came up with, they did experiments on new medications where they put people in a state where they're still alive, but they're under a state where I can extract your organs, your heart, your kidneys, your liver, and keep your body alive as long as possible, so that they can extract more and that those organs can be viable for a longer period. A heart is only good outside the body for a day at most, usually about 12 hours. Kidney, maybe a couple days. So if I can extend that period, I can therefore have a longer period of time to get it to somebody. So it's very famous, this guy Wang Lijun, who is this famous police officer that tried to come to the United States for asylum. He had gone to the US Embassy. He had done a lot of research, thousands of people they had performed this research on to develop a new drug to keep people alive while they extract the organs, which is really sick if you come to think about it.
It's gruesome and horrific.
Even worse than that, we've heard from first-hand accounts where people witnessed, without anesthesia, that they were extracting people's organs while they were still awake.
Wow.
And the way they died was not through being shot, but the way they died was they would extract enough organs and they would go into shock and die. Now that's something hard to believe, because from the US we think, how could something like that happen in today's age, right? And it's something that's really hard to comprehend. But in China, it's a different situation. Those people in jail, they're considered enemy of the state, which means they have no rights. They have no rights to a free trial. They have no rights to the same standards we have here in the United States. And they're really considered an enemy. And they do some cruel and inhumane things to those people.
And I've been hearing lately that it's mainly Falun Gong practitioners that this horrific, I don't even know what to say.
Initially, we had reports that in some regions, like in Tibetan region or in the outer western region of China, where the Muslim Uyghurs are, initially we had some small reports of them being killed for their organs, but the vast majority of the research has shown that it's Falun Gong practitioners in China that their organs are being taken from. And the reason for that is, one, the scale of the persecution against Falun Gong. They had millions of people in jail at one time. When the persecution in 1999 started of Falun Gong, it was estimated over 2 million people were put in jail and in these forced labor camps all across China. And the large numbers of people that they had in these prisons made it easy and these organs very accessible. And the fact that the persecution took place all across the country, not just in one specific region, made it very readable and easily accessible, these organs. So instead of just, it's different. People have to understand, in the United States, when you have someone get into a car accident in California, if your organs are matched to someone in New Jersey, there's a way to get those organs very quickly. We have a system in place to take that person's organs and get it very quickly to the person in New Jersey. It's a very advanced, sophisticated system. In China, they don't have this distribution system. They have a very local, regional system where they're getting from the hospitals in that region an organ. So if you go to Beijing to get an organ, you're getting it from a prison camp or a labor camp or a hospital right in that region.
Wow.
They're not taking it from somewhere else. So the fact that Falun Gong was being persecuted against all across the country made it a very readable, easily option for these people. And people need to understand that this is a very profitable business. You know, when we're talking about big money, we're talking about big money. So for instance, a kidney could go up to $60,000 to $75,000. A liver could go to $100,000, $125,000. A heart could be $150,000 to $200,000. So if you stop and think about that, if you executed one person, you took both their kidneys, you got their liver, you got their heart, you could be talking about $500,000 US that one executed prisoner could bring to a hospital, a labor camp, or a prison system. We know China definitely transplants at a minimum 10,000 people a year. There was hospitals in around 2006, 2007 on their website saying that the most profitable portion of their hospital was their transplant wing.
Wow.
They were making all their money off of these transplants. That's huge, because if you think about China's hospital system, they were really in dire straits, meaning they were having a hard time surviving. And along came a way to make a lot of money and do it quickly. So this was an opportunity these hospitals jumped on, because here you have a way to make a lot of money, not get into any trouble, and you could have unlimited amount of supply of cash.
And you're not accountable to anybody.
Exactly.
Wow.
You know, I like to tell people that China had what we call the perfect storm, meaning a scenario came about that made it possible for all this to happen. You had a group of people put into jail who were made enemies of the state, who had no rights. You had a system where you didn't have a checks and balance system, meaning there's no oversight to these doctors, these military institutions. It's all under one system. And then you have a way to make a lot of money, and no one's looking. That's a perfect storm. That's just a way. That's why we don't allow executed prisoners to be used as a source of organs, because the potential for that to go wrong is high.
But aren't doctors supposed to save lives instead of taking lives?
We talk about the Hippocratic Oath, right? To do no harm. That's what we all, when we swear in, when we say we're going to become doctors, we say through an oath that we're not going to harm people. That's, you know, when you look at, people talk about the atrocities that were committed in World War II by the Nazis. You know, it was doctors that did a lot of those atrocities. It was doctors who did a lot of horrible experiments on people in the name of advancing science and advancing their cause. You know, here, it's a different situation in China. You have a doctor being told, if you don't do it, we're going to find someone else to do it. If you don't do it, you're not going to advance in your career. If you don't do it, maybe I'm going to throw you in prison. You know, it's easy to look from outside and say, oh, these guys are doing something horrible. But when you're faced in that situation, when you're told by your superiors, listen, this is an enemy of the state. We're going to kill him anyways, right?
And
we're
if you
going
don't
to shoot
do
this
this,
guy.
you'll go to jail.
Yeah,
You'll be persecuted.
We can punish you. If not, we're going to kill this person, and that's going to be a waste. Here, we're giving you an opportunity. Not only we're going to kill them, but we're going to do something positive for someone else. So they start justifying it in their mind and say, you know what? I'm going to do at least something good. This guy's going to die anyways. Not only that, their sense of wanting China to improve is very strong. People, I find when I talk with a lot of Chinese people, Chinese doctors, their sense of pride in their country is very high. And they were looked down upon for many years that China was in the dark ages and wasn't advancing. And here was an opportunity for them to advance. China was in the medical field very low, considered very insignificant. They went from a transplant community of, you know, not even 100th in the world. Now they're number 2 in the world. They're proud of that. Those doctors are saying, you know what, we're the second most advanced transplant community in the world. There's honor in that, and they want to contribute to that. And I understand that. They want to be respected by the rest of the world.
What has the medical international community done in this travesty of forced organ harvesting?
I think the medical community has done a bit, but I think needs to do a lot more. there's been some countries, their medical communities have done a lot more than others. For instance, Israel's medical community really rallied together. Before the medical community came together, their insurance companies used to pay for almost everything. You would go to China, get an organ, come back, get care in Israel. Those Israeli insurance companies were paying for everything. Now they pass laws that their insurance company is not allowed to pay for anything. There's other countries like Malaysia are looking at laws, and this is through the medical community pushing this, to say that, you know what, it's illegal to do medical tourism to go to China to get these organs. There's also been a lot of pressure from the International Transplant Society. I'll give you an example. When you do research in transplant medicine in China, before they were able to publish their articles in international journals, very reputable, famous journals, now it's very difficult for the research being done in China to be accepted. Now, has enough being done? If you ask me, I say no. We need to put more pressure. I'll give you an example. China is still a member of the World Health Organization. China is still a member of the International Transplant Community, International Transplant Society. They're still a full-fledged member. To me, I say let's revoke their membership. But there's a lot of people in the medical community who believe, you know what, let's keep them involved. We want them to do better. Let's hope they do better. So I think the medical community needs to do more.
What about the medical communities in the United States?
A lot of doctors have stepped forward, and when we first founded this organization, Doctors Against Forced Organ Harvesting, it was a small group of doctors, but now we have hundreds of doctors getting involved, and every month we have more. And we have resolutions, we've had petitions, and so many doctors are starting to get involved, not only in the United States, but internationally. People are saying this is really an atrocity, we need to come together to stop it. And I've been impressed with the amount of physicians stepping forward. Saying that, do we need more? Absolutely, we do need more. We've met with big organizations like the American Medical Association. They want to do more. So things are getting better.
This has been a heart-wrenching interview for me, and I kind of feel it personal, and it almost is bringing me to tears to know that live organs are being harvested from individuals. So I just want to take this time to say thank you, and I commend you. And I also noticed that you have an article in the Epoch Times, and it's you really making people aware. And I just want to thank you again for coming to Pure Heart, Clear Mind and giving us the interview.
It's really my honor to talk about this and let more people know about it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.